Well, for more, we're joined now by Mattie Duppler, Senior Fellow at the National Taxpayers Union. Mattie, I guess the key question everyone is still trying to understand here is how likely is a recession? Is that what the market is signalling to us?
Well, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, I want to point out the fact that even though President Trump has for months and months talked about the stock market and the economy as though they are interchangeable, they are not. The stock market is just one component of the United States economy. And if you look into the last month, we had some very strong data telling us exactly what the economy looked like. We had very, very positive jobs numbers released last week, even after the news of the coronavirus started to really take hold. So there are a lot of reasons to believe that the U.S. economy can withstand the threat of this virus. The question is whether or not policymakers take a sober and tough look at what they can do to keep some of the effects at bay. That's really what I think we should be asking about. Not whether or not a recession is at the brink, because I think that it's possible the United States economy can certainly withstand the pressures from this virus. The question is how our policymakers respond. Today, the White House is meeting with top officials and the president to talk about how the White House may respond. Members of Congress and leadership have already put out some of their demands for a fiscal policy response. And of course, the central bank last week convened an emergency meeting and decided to cut rates at half a percentage point in an effort to get ahead of some of the worst effects of the virus spreading in the United States.
But I mean, Mattie, we've seen, as you said, there was skeptical reaction from Wall Street to that emergency rate cut from the Federal Reserve. We're still waiting to see what the government comes up with in terms of what tools they decide to deploy to support the economy. And yet the concern you hear from Wall Street sitting here in New York is that they're worried businesses might not have enough cash flow, might end up struggling to meet loans, might end up even in worst case scenarios going bankrupt.
That's right. And I think that when you saw the response from the markets last week to the Fed's emergency rate cut, that did indicate that there are limits to what monetary policy can do. That was on Tuesday last week. Wednesday, the House of Representatives passed the coronavirus supplemental aid bill, and the market actually reacted pretty positively to that. So I think what the markets are telling us is that we need a concentrated fiscal policy response. As I mentioned, both the White House and Congress are considering what that response will be. Now, I think that it really does matter what policymakers are willing to put on the table. The White House has, of course, considered a payroll tax cut. Something we know from the tax cuts that were passed in 2017 is that Americans actually don't pay too closely attention when their paychecks change. So that, I think, would have limited effect. In addition, one of the main concerns is that when people are out of work, they're not getting a paycheck. So a payroll tax cut wouldn't have that much of an impact. Certainly, policymakers should be looking at what we can do to extend sick leave for those who do have to miss work. And of course, trying to prevent defaults, both from small businesses and from individuals who are worried about paying their mortgage. That, I think, would do the most in terms of offering a targeted response to make sure the coronavirus economic effect is contained.
I want to put the counter argument to that, though, Mattie. A lot of people are saying this is spreading out of control now. In Europe, 30 countries are dealing with COVID-19 this side. We're seeing it across America. You're talking about an economic response. The first priority of the government, surely, is to get a hold of the virus, to get a hold of the testing regime, and to put some clarity to people in America about what the results are.
I think that's absolutely correct, and the White House and Congress need to have a concentrated response to let Americans know not only what they can be doing individually to prevent the spread of the disease, but also what governments are going to do, state and federal governments, in order to contain the virus. I think that the administration has started to do some of that. We've seen press conferences from the vice president and a number of members of the cabinet in order to talk about what the government is doing. We certainly need more of it. And one thing in the United States that we really need to continue to express is the need for testing and making sure that we're getting a handle on how many cases are out there. Now, I do think that the administration has been clear that that is their intent and their goal, but certainly as we continue to talk about not knowing the extent of what the virus's impact will be, the administration needs to send a clear message to the American people that they have a plan in place and they'll be following it, and that Americans have expectations about what they can be doing in order to secure their households and themselves.
Mattie Duppler, thank you very much for that perspective. Very interesting. Let me just